All right, so last time for the lecture, we had this example application. This is like a school roster. So the app was students. Maybe this is not well named, but we have like we have a bunch of students. We have a system for managing students, maybe like a school system or something. And then we have a roster app, which is basically like managing students as such. And what we're going to do today is we're going to add another app to this project, and then we're going to write some tests. So we've been doing Django. So we've now gone through models. We should be familiar with models. And we've had a couple run-throughs with the views and templates and putting all that together. So the question at this point, well, one question is how do we write tests for all this stuff? So I'm going to clone this. And now I've got this here. So I've cloned this repo. I have unfortunately not given a requirements.txt file, which would be something that I would want to do if I were hosting this, or if I were making this code available. So you'd get the source code and then run the requirements, install everything, and then you could run the app immediately. So I'm going to have to go through the process of creating a virtual environment. So Python-m then and I'm going to install both Django and Django extensions. Django extensions just for convenience. So source. So Python, oops. So install Django. All right. So if you look at the structure, we have the students. So the settings, you can see the installed apps. I have school roster installed and this Django extension app. And then my URLs. Let's see, John, can you tell me what the urls.py does?
So the urls.py, like whenever you go to a website, it'll look, so for like the project URLs, it'll look if you have like that admin / for example, that's going to take you to your admin roster. It's going to see if there's that roster there. If there is, it's going to go to the school roster URLs. And it's basically just going to pass it off to that URLs file.
So the school roster URLs.
Yep.
Then we have further processing of the URLs can happen here. So we have 3 more kind of subroutes here. All right, and then let's say I go to all. Let's see. Jim, so what happens if I go to /all?
It pulls up, it returns whatever the all students method in that view returns.
Okay. So if we go to the view and then all students.
Okay, so that is, so you're querying your database student entity, you're getting all the records, and then you're setting it to the student's key in your context.
Okay.
And then that is being rendered inside of your all students template.
All right. So Deb, so this template is being rendered. So can you tell me about the template here?
It's being rendered in the HTML section.
Okay, so we go to templates and then all students. So what's going to end up being displayed to the client?
it'll be students.name. And then the enrollment information, students.date.enrollment. And then looks like the URLs, students.detail URL, the ID information,
Okay.
the link.
Okay. So how many students are going to be displayed on this HTML page?
How many students, whatever, the number of students in the database?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So we don't have to predetermine that. We don't have to hard code this. This will be dynamically generated. So if we have 10 students, we'll get 10 of these little chunks. If we have 100, we'll get 100 of these chunks. All right. So I'm going to go, let's see, I have migrations. Do I have the database? I don't think I do. So I'm going to go ahead and run migration. So Python, make sure I'm in the right place. The student roster, Python, manage.py. I'll just to make sure, make migrations. Okay, no changes. And I will do Python manage.py migrate. Okay, so now I have this database and I'm going to go ahead and run the server, Python manage.py run server. And that should be here. So what just happened?
You don't have a route for an empty path.
Yes. So we look at our top level URLs file. We have, if you have /admin or /roster, we don't have /nothing. So that's, Django doesn't know what to do with that, so we get an error. All right, so if we go instead to a route that we do have, /roster, we also get a 404. So why is that? So this one hits.
Go to your main URLs again. It's
So here's the project level URLs, and then if we look in the app level URLs, so the
yeah, because you have to have roster/all or roster/
right.
ID or roster/new.
Exactly. So even though we have roster here, we don't have roster/nothing. So we have to have roster/ one of the other things we have. We go to all, and we get our page. Now we don't have anything in our database, so we could go ahead and create. So I'm going to open a new terminal. So Python manage.py shell plus, and I'm just going to add a couple students. So student.objects.create. Oh, keyword, right? Name equals, and then Jane. Okay, so I have added 2 students. I refresh, and now I have these 2 students showing up, and this link should work. Looks like it does. Okay. So let's. I was going to do the other app first, but maybe let's write. I think we should write the tests for this first. So we have an app. We can test it ourselves, kind of just click around and see if stuff works and be pretty sure that it's good. But as usual, we kind of want to automate this stuff for the sake of consistency and completeness. So we're gonna write some tests for the school roster. All right. So you can organize the tests in a couple different ways, but by default, you'll get a test.py file in every app. And then the test is very similar to built-in unit test. So Django's test case here will inherit ultimately from unit test.test case. And we can write this the same basic way. So we're going to talk about testing two different things. So we're going to test our templates, and we're going to test, well, we're basically going to test the view, and then we're going to test the model. There are other kinds of tests you can do, but this is the basics. So first, let's test the models. So I'm going to write a test class test roster models. And I'm going to inherit from Django's test case, which is already right there. And if we're testing the models, we're going to want to write a bunch of tests for the models. So what database does Django use when we run tests?
An internal one.
Yeah. Yeah, so it will create a default throwaway database. So your actual database won't be affected. So when we run the test, we're going to want some kind of dummy data in there, presumably. So there's a couple ways to get dummy data in there. We'll look at two. So there's fixtures, where you can include a file, like a JSON file, that will have set data in there. And you can also just create it as you need it. So you might recall from talking about unit tests, we have a function built in called setup, which will run for every test. And there's Django has, so let's go here. So here is the Django documentation for tests. Here's an example of a test case. It's using setup, which we could do. We can also do, let me just look for it. Just do a search. Oh my goodness. Here we go. Testing. There we go. So set up test data. So this is, so the description here, the class level atomic block described above allows the creation of initial data at the class level, once for the whole test case. So this is kind of a Django specific version of this when you're trying to test your models, basically, or when you want to create data. So we'll use, there's a class method, setup test data. Let's go ahead and do that. Class method, so we'll decorate it, and then all right, so we're going to set up, we're basically going to create some dummy data for our dummy database. And in order to do that, we're going to need access to our models. So that means we're going to have to import our models right here. We have our student model. So from .models import student. And we'll just create a couple CLS S1 equals students dot objects dot create name equals Bob, and then we'll just we'll make two cls dot s2 equals. All right, so now we have some dummy students in here, so we can actually start testing. So there are a few things we could test. One initial thing to do is to test your string method. So if we look here in the models, we have this custom string method, so we can test that and make sure that that's actually displaying what we expect. So def test so we can do self.assert contains, let's say. And we'll do the string version of self.s1. And let's see, I just don't want to deal with the date time. So we'll do name : Bob. Where are we here? So let's run the test. So Python manage.py test, that's the command. It will automatically find all of the tests as long as you've labeled them, as long as you're using the conventions. And okay, string has no object status code. So let's see. Let me try doing something. I don't know why it's looking for status code. Browser.test. And let me try printing this. So I'll copy this and let me try that. Yeah, so that will not work. Not sure why the contains is not working. Let me take a quick search. So Django. response instance. Okay. Okay, so this expects, sorry, I was just, so assert contains expects an HTML, an HTTP response. So I was just trying to use it with a string, so that won't work. So I'm going to do something like, I'm not sure. Let's see. Let's try this. Let's do assert.
I think if you just reverse the argument order, right? Because it's looking for the full string in Bob.
Okay, let's see. I'm not sure if this if this assumes an array. Sorry, but let me do in. Let's try that. Okay, yeah, cool. So assert in. This will be a string. So let's try name. All right. Okay, so so that works. Thank you. So we can test our string. We can also do something like let's see. Test the string. We can test the count. So we can try test the number if we can create one successfully. So def test add new student. So we'll start with self.assert equal. So I'm going to grab all of these. So all students equals student dot objects dot all, and all students dot count to. Okay, so that works, and then I can try adding one. So student dot objects dot create. And then self.assert. We'll run this again. Okay. So there, this is the basic idea where we have, we can test our models. We inherit from test case. We can have some kind of setup where we give some initial dummy data, even do other things, and then we can test some stuff. So that's testing the model. That's the basics of testing a model. We can also test a view. So, if I go to a certain route, what kind of response am I going to get? So in order to do this, we're actually going to import something called a client. So Django has built in a way of basically making HTTP requests. We can use that. So, and that comes from Django.test client. All right. So I'm going to create another class here. So class test roster views. And that will inherit from test case. Okay. And then I think I'm gonna do the same thing here. so I can have some data to work with. And then, let's see, I'm also going to want to have a client available to me, probably for every test. So I'm going to use the regular setup, so def setup. And I'm going to create an instance of a client. So self.client equals client. So I have an instance of this client, and this client, let's look at the docs right here. So the test client, you can simulate get and post requests to URL and so on. So that we can simulate requests, we can get post requests, get requests, and we can look at all kinds of things in the response. All right, so we've got this set up, and now first thing we can do is let's just test if let's see, let's test if let's just test if we can make a get request and then a get request to roster all, and if we get the given template. So we can actually write tests to make sure that we get the correct template. So here we'll do def test all so this is the response, and we'll do self.client.get. So we're going to make a get request, and the first thing is going to be the path. So basically the last part of the URL, and we'll have to, it has to have opening and closing slashes. So we're going to do roster /all. We're going to go to /roster /all. And then we can first off, well, let's change this, not the template, but returns 200. So we can check if we get a 200 response. So self.assert equal what is it, status code 200. So let's see if we make a request, if we get 200 status code, and we do. So that's good. That means basically that Django knows where this thing is. So we can be a little bit more specific. Let's write that def test all returns template. And we'll do the same thing. And I'll just tell you that there's so you can write basically, you can like hard code the URLs here, but we also have, if you recall, in the URLs, we have these names that we can give them, these routes. So we have named routes. So instead of, it's possible, I mean, your path shouldn't really change. It should be stable, but here's just a dynamic way of getting it in case they do change. You don't have to change it everywhere. So you can grab this route directly by its name. So instead of passing the string, we have to call in something else, which is a reverse function. So a reverse function is going to take the name of the route as a parameter, and it's going to figure out what the correct path is. So we're going to have to import that from Django.urls, import, I believe it's URLs, reverse. So then we'll make this request, reverse, and what is this called? All students. No. Okay, so we're gonna make a GET request to all students, and then we're gonna do this self.assert template used. So this is something that Django gives you, for this purpose. So you have to pass it the response first. So response, and then you give it a string, which is the template name. So we have the template name. If you look at our view, the all students, here is that template name, school roster / all students.html. Let's try running this test now. And that passes, and just to make sure, so this fails. Okay, so now we know that our view is working. If we get a particular request to a particular route, it's going to return a particular template. So we can also test. We can test the content of the HTML that we get back, the content from that template. So def test. Let's say first student in all. So I'm just gonna, we're gonna make a request. We're gonna get back template. We're gonna look at the HTML, and then we're gonna make sure a particular string or whatever that we're looking for is in there. So if we look at our templates for all students, we should, for example, we could have name : Bob, or whatever, actually similar to what we were testing in the models. So here we can do, let's see, I'm gonna copy this. And then I'm going to do self.assert contains, is the actual use for contains. So first will be the response. And then, so by default, as we know from HTTP server, everything is bytes, everything, is transferred in bytes. So we could, if we want to search for a particular string, we could do bytes and then name Bob. I think that should do it. Is there a third parameter? Let's try this. So that works. And if we didn't make it bytes, that should test. Well, I think that should fail. You could also pass it in HTML is true, which earlier was, I think, just converting it from bytes. Yeah, so if you use HTML is true, you can't use bytes. Apparently it will implicitly convert. I'm not sure why it would do that, but anyway, here's you can use HTML is true if you want to test that a string is in the HTML that you get back. All right. So again, this is the general idea. You can test all kinds of things. I just want to maybe, so we've done a little bit of repetition, it looks like. So we have these two classes, and we have this setup method, which is the same for both of them. So depending on how many tests you're writing, this might be something worth refactoring. So what we can do is actually because these are just classes, you can actually write a class which takes care of the basic. So let's do class basic test cluster, and we'll inherit from test case. And I'm just going to pull this out. And now instead of inheriting from test case, we're going to inherit from basic test roster. And I'll do the same here. And that also works. So depending on, what you're doing, you may find that there's a lot of common features which you might want to refactor into a class you can inherit from. So are there questions about testing models and views?
I just, it seems like a lot of the tests that we're running are kind of testing Django functionality.
Right.
Are there some more like different types of tests that we can look at as well?
Yeah, I mean, so that is true. So for example, testing if we add something to the database, if it shows up in the database, that could seem like testing Django, but we're also testing the fact that we can create an instance of a student in the way we expect. So with this parameter name as opposed to something else. Making a request to a particular route. So if we did something like this, that would fail, and that's not what so that's meaningful. That's a meaningful test for this application. I mean, the built-in stuff that Django gives you for testing is, I mean, you test the models and you test the views. If you actually want to do more detailed testing of like the HTML, you'd have to use another tool like Selenium or something like that. So there are other testing tools you can use if you have, for example, JavaScript on your HTML that you want to test, or make sure that a particular button is showing up in a particular place. You can do you can add those tests, but that's not built into Django.
What is the reverse parameter doing?
So reverse, so this is doing the same thing as this. So both of these are the same. I mean, they're doing the same thing. This is we're hard coding our path. And what reverse is doing, instead of hard coding the path, we're using the name that we gave it. So we have a named route here that we in URLs. So we have this route here, which is /all, and we give it a name. So we can use this name to refer to this route elsewhere in the application. So you can use this name, for example, in the HTML. So student detail is a named route. So rather than hard coding whatever this is, we can give it a name. And then also in our tests, if we want to use that route, we give it a name. So it's just a way of, if anything needs to change, it only changes in one place. So if now this is not called all, this is called alls or whatever, we don't have to change anything else in our code. I mean, we would have to change this test, but all these other tests and our anchor tags wouldn't have to change.
Okay, so you have to put reverse there to call it by its name.
Yeah, so you're reversing, you're going from the name to the path.
Okay.
That's
Thanks.
the reversal. Okay. So I'm going to create another app here. I'm going to create another app called grades. So if we imagine that, this is our application, it's for, managing a school or something like that. We have a students application. If you just want to look up students, then we have a grades application. So maybe if, for teachers to add grades or whatever. So we're going to create another application. And you do Django admin start app grades. All right, so we have this grades app, and maybe the first thing, before I forget, I'm going to add it here to the installed apps. So Django school roster, and then grades. So now my project knows about it. So I'm going to go in here to the models, and I'm going to say, so I'm going to keep this very simple, and we'll say that grades has a many-to-many relationship to student. So yeah, class grade models.model. So we have like a fixed number of grades, A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever, not E, but A, B, C, D, F. And then the student can have lots of grades, and a given grade could belong to lots of students. So we'll do equals models dot. You want character field, and we'll just say it's a single character. And we could also enforce a unique constraint, so you don't have lots of A's or lots of B's or whatever. And then we want students, and we want a many-to-many field, so models dot many-to-many field. And we want to hook it up to students, so we're gonna have to import that model. And that model is living in another app here, the school roster models. So import it, so from school roster.models, import student. So now we can add student, and you can give it a related name. So you don't have to do this, but we'll give it a related name. Related name equals grades. So if you want all the students' grades, you do student.grades. All right. All right. We have grades. Let's add a string method here. Return. Something like that. Okay. Okay, so I think that should be good. So what do we need to do now if we want to make sure this is working? We just changed our models.
The migration commands?
Yep, yeah. So Python manage.py make migrations. Python manage.py migrate. All right. So now, hopefully this is good. So let's go into the shell and check it out. We can add some grades. Python. Okay, so let's check student.objects.all. Okay, and grade.objects.all. Okay. So we can, let's create some, let's grab the student. So S1 equals, we'll just do 1, I think. Well, let's create a bunch of grades. So A equals grade dot objects create. And we'll do letter equals A. C. All right. Okay, so you have a bunch of grades. So I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm going to have a student, and then I'm going to add a grade to the student. So S1 equals student dot objects dot get PK 1. So S1 dot grades dot add A and B, and then I'm going to, I think we have 2 students, so let's do S. So S2 dot grades dot add E C. All right, so if I want to see all of Bob's grades, first student S1 dot grades dot all, and he has 2 grades. And if I want to do, let's see, we'll just see the other one. Okay, so we have Sally. I don't know what the second one is. 2 grades, and then we can see that they both have B's. So let's try getting B dot students dot all. So the grade B is associated with 2 students, and A should just have 1 student. Okay. So we have this set up now. And let's say now that we have the models set up and a little bit of dummy data, we want to create a new route. And we're just going to do one route, but we want to display, let's say, for a given student, all of that student's grades. So we'll start at the top level here, students URLs, and we'll add another path here. So path grades, and we'll do include. Okay, so let's see. Anthony, what should I include?
Can you go to the URLs page?
What URLs page?
Do we need to include the roster? Like, so above there, we're including roster URLs. Do we need to paste another URL?
Yes. So we need to include the grades URLs. So do we have a URLs for grades?
No.
Okay. So we can still put in what it will be, or we could write it first and then come back.
Let's go make it.
Okay. Let's go to grades. So grades doesn't have URLs. Let's go ahead and add that. And I'll get the boilerplate here. So from Django.urls import path. And path. Okay, so the first thing we need is the route.
So where is it?
Yeah.
Can
So
you come from originally?
let's go back to here. So what do we put in this? What do we give as a parameter to include here?
So we gotta tell it to look in that new apps folder, URLs folder.
Yes, exactly. And the new app is called grades.
So is it gonna be grades.urls?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, grades.urls. And that will point us to grades.urls, this file right here. So now this path, let's just say we're going to stick with this format of doing, so we're going to go to grades/1 for student one's grades. So the way we do that with Django is this caret and then int. And we'll colon, and then we'll give it a name. So student ID, and then you need the closing slash. And then the second parameter is what? Let's see. Anyone else?
The function from the views file.
Yeah. Sorry, one sec. Yeah, the function from the views file. So we don't have that function written yet, but we can go ahead and put it in. So let's just call that, we'll call that student grades. And then we can give it a name, just for usually a good default thing to do. Okay, and we don't, urls.py doesn't know anything about this. We haven't defined it yet, so we have to import it. So from views, import student grades. And of course, views doesn't have student grades. So we're gonna have to write that function. So what does every view function take as a first parameter?
A request.
Yep. Request, and is this a special case?
And a parameter.
Yeah. So it's going to get past this student ID as well. Okay, so now we have our grades app, right? And I want to see all of Bob's students or all of Bob's grades. So I go to whatever /grades/1, because that's Bob's ID. And then I expect to see, let's say his name, the student's name, and then all of their grades. How am I going to get that information?
You have to import the model.
Okay, so what model should I import?
If you're using student ID, I guess you could use the model from the students.
Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna have to use student, so I'm gonna import it. So from and that's coming from another app. So school roster dot models import student. So I have the student model. Am I going to need any other models?
You need the one from grades too.
Yes. So I will also from dot models import grade. All right, so now I have the models, and again, so I go to /grade/1. So student ID is 1. This is Bob, and I want to get all of Bob's grades. So how do I get all of Bob's grades?
So maybe student equals student dot objects dot get ID equals student ID.
All right. Use ID or PK. Either ones will work. So student ID. Okay. So now we have Bob, and we want to get all of Bob's grades.
So grades equals student dot grades dot all.
Okay. This will give us, we get the students from the URL. So 1, 2, 3, whatever the ID is. And then we get all of their grades here. Okay, so we have the information that we need. We have to deliver that somehow, and we're going to use HTML to do that.
We need a context.
Okay, so context. And we'll say student. And then what does every view function have to return?
The request.
Okay, I mean, it has to return the.
I mean, render, you have to do return render.
Okay.
Um,
And then the first parameter here is the request. And what's the second parameter?
the name of the template
Right. So
and then context.
yeah, so we don't have a template yet, but we can fill it in for now. So it'll be grades / we'll just call it student grades.html. So then we're going to have to create this. So for templates, anyone remember how you structure templates?
You need 2 folders, one inside the other, templates,
Okay.
and then the name of the app.
Okay, so grades, and then inside grades, we will do student. By the way, someone from the full-time class posted something about changing this. I had never even thought to change it, but by default, if you have an empty folder here, it will collapse it. You can change that in the settings if that is annoying to you. Okay, so now we have this HTML document. I'm going to get the boilerplate going, and this is the H1. Student grades. And let's see, it is 7 o'clock now, so probably another 15 or so minutes. You can take a break or you can push through.
Push through.
Push.
All right. Pushers have it. let's do student grades. And so we know that we're going to get a couple things. So one, the student name. So let's go back to our views here. Yeah. So our context, we're going to have a student, which should be a single thing. And then we're going to have grades, and we don't know how many grades there are. So first thing, since we know there's only one student, oops. Okay, H2 it is. Student and name. We'll just say we only care about the name here. And then I don't know how many grades there are. So how should I handle this?
For loop.
Okay. Patrick, how can I write a for loop here?
You can use the abstract piece that the Django has with the brackets.
Okay.
The percentage to open and close.
Okay. So for grade in grades. And I like to take care of this off the bat so I don't forget. Whoops, and 4. And then we'll just keep it simple. Grade dot letter, I believe we called it. Okay, so I think we're good. So we have, if we started our project URLs, we go to /grades. That will kick us to grades.urls, which should, if we give it an ID, should serve up this function, call this function student grades. So go to views, student grades. This will grab information from the database and then inject that information into a template, studentgrades.html, which is right here. And it should serve that up. So let's see. Okay, that looks okay. Refresh this. So I'm not going to go to roster. I'm going to go to grades. Okay, so it doesn't like that because there's no just grades. So we have to pass it a particular ID. And yeah, Bob has an A and a B. And Jane has a B and a C. And if you go to 3, you get an error because we're not handling that error. Okay, so that's all working. Now we'd like to firm this up, or if we were doing test-driven development, we would have written the tests already. So we'll go into the tests here. So I'll break this up into 2. We'll test the models and we'll test the views. So test grade models. And that will inherit from test case. Would you guys like to see fixtures? It'll take a couple minutes to get the JSON, but let's see fixtures. Had not, okay. So we'll instead of populating the dummy data in the the setup function, we'll just use fixtures. So fixtures equals, and this will take a list of strings, and we'll call it grade fixtures.json, which we have not written yet, but we will. So we'll go into our app level, the grades, and we'll create a folder called fixtures. And the file grade fixtures.json. All right. And then let's see. Okay, so let's look up just to get the basic format. So we can use different, so YAML, as you can see, YAML's a little cleaner, but we'll use JSON. So the basic is going to have a model, a key, and then the fields. That's the basic structure. So I'm just going to copy that example. The model, it's not myapp.person, but grades dot grade. We can create models. Where is that? We have a letter and we have students. Let's do this for now. Make this a B, and that will be 2 and 3 and C. And then we're also going to have I've done this for one-to-many. We'll see if this works for many-to-many. So we're going to need to create student. So let's do that. Let's create one student for now. So model will be student school roster. Student PK will be 1 fields. And then you check this. Date enrolled. And this is going to have to be a dummy date. Dummy date. Let's do. Yeah. And then let me just look up. Okay, so you can pass it an array. So we'll try this. I may need to rearrange it, but date enrolled. Let's do. All right, let's see if this works. Go to the tests. import. So from school roster dot models import student. All right. Okay, looks like that will not work. Yeah, it's not. Well, I don't want to waste too much time here. I will figure this out. I hadn't actually done many to many yet. So I will look this up, and then over the break, I'll post how to do this. So for now, I think we're gonna, in the interest of time, we'll just do the setup. So def dot s1. All right, so import grade, and then grade dot objects dot create, and then letter is A. And then I will add, so CLS dot S1 dot all right, so that should do it. So Bob should now have an A and a B. Let's try running this test. All right, so that passes. And let's do self.bob exists. We can also try testing, like if we get an error, if we try creating A again. So def, let's see. You do that. Actually, I'm remembering there's one more thing that I wanted to show you guys on the other one. So I'm going to switch back. So you do the same thing here. So you test this, and then you test the you test the views. You make a GET request. You can test the HTML. I want to go here. There's one other thing. The view is a little more complicated in students because you're making a post request. Where's this? The school roster tests. Okay, so let's look at the views. So we're just making GET requests. I want to go over making a post request real quick. So def test post request directs. So the standard pattern for post request is you redirect after. So we want to test that functionality. So response is self.clients.post. And so we want to post data to, I believe it's all students. So we're going to use this reverse. So we're going to post to all students, and we're going to pass it in a body. So I can create a body object here. And what that's going to take is if you want to create a student, you need to pass it the name. And the name comes from the form.
Does your all students view actually accept post?
Oh, it was new. That's right. Sorry. So let's double check that. Create student. So /new. Okay, and then the body, if we look at the template for new student, the value that we're passing in from the form is called student name. So we're going to need to pass that in into the form. So that will be student name. So that's all we should need. And then body. And then we can do, there's actually an assert redirects built in to Django. So self.assert redirect. And that will take the response as the first parameter, and then the expected URL. So we're redirecting, if you recall, back to the all students. So listing everything. So we can pass that in as well. So let's run the tests. That works. And if we change this, for example, it should fail. And we could also check that the our database actually got updated. So def test post updates UB. And I'm just basically going to copy all this. Yes, and then let's do new student.name. I can Maintain, whoops. And that test passes. So this is the basic idea. Sorry, I got a little off track here, messing around with the fixtures, but I will figure out how to do many to many with the fixtures over the break, and I'll post that in Slack. So are there any questions about testing? Of course, this can get more complicated. There are a couple other tools, but this is the basic stuff, testing the models and testing the views.
Yeah, like when you run Python tests, manage py.test, which test is it running? Since we have two apps, is it running all the tests in both apps?
Yeah, it's looking for certain defaults, like a file named test.py, and then all of the methods that start with test. So it's basically going through and just gathering all the tests automatically. As long as you follow the conventions, it will automatically find all of the tests that you have. And you can specify, let's say you don't want to run all of the project's tests, you could do test and then not school teacher, school roster. So that only runs the school roster apps tests. And I believe you can further specify, I don't know what the syntax is, but you can actually specify like specific tests. So if you only want to run one test, you can tell it that. So just, as if this were like a production level application, you probably have a whole bunch of tests. And so you wouldn't necessarily want to run, if there's one test you're working on, trying to make it work, you don't want to be running all of the tests all the time necessarily. All right. So the lectures, as we get into like the frameworks, unfortunately, the lectures are long, and it's going to be the same with React. So the challenge for today doesn't explicitly tell you to write tests, but might be worth giving a shot, at least one or two.